Yeah, stop where you are. We're not going to stop the conversation, but we'll continue it as a full group. I'm going to, Suzanne, why don't we start with this table here, and we'll sort of go back to the back, and then we'll come to the front. If we could, have one person at the table stand up, take the microphone, and just pick one of the things that you talked about. You may have talked about more than one, but just pick one expectation or aspiration for the session. Suzanne will hand you the microphone, and please share with us. It can be anybody. And by the way, she will hand the microphone to somebody if you can't agree quickly.
I'll take the microphone and I'll tell you what she said.
We just pointed out how autism really affects everybody, both directly and indirectly, so that we're all in this together. So we want to make sure we bridge, these populations. And in the process, we're also talking about how we can empower folks who are on the spectrum to be able to share their story, and not only that, but to be self-advocates, and that the library can help in this process.
Super. Let's go to the next table. But one goal is how to help people be self-advocates and share their stories. Good. One additional goal or expectation. Go ahead.
Our table was looking at having a training component so that we can just grab and go and take back to our organizations for our head personnel to be comfortable with the tools that we're giving them with any type of reaching out to that community, doing programs for the community, helping the parents and empowering the parents to bring them to our institutions without any fear of repercussion or just any fear of my kiddos stimming. Oh my gosh, I gotta get them out of the library, they're too loud. So it's just something for the head personnel and even our staff members to really empower them with some sort of training component.
Super. So, training to help people make libraries more accessible. Let's go to the next table.
So we also talked about sort of creating action items, like something that we can immediately take back, whether it's a resource that we can share with our staff, whether it's just a straight up definition for people who aren't aware of what's going on. Just at our table, we were talking about different resources, and half the people at the table had no idea what those resources were. So sort of creating not necessarily a guidebook, but something simple to take back. And sort of like what she was saying, just give people more information and bring more awareness to the fact that this does affect everyone.
Nice. By the way, I'm taking the notes on the screen as you're talking. These will be your notes. And by the way, if at the break you see anything that needs to be added or adjusted, you can certainly do so. But all the notes that you see here, think of this as a big, fancy electronic flip chart. Let's go to the next table.
We actually repeated a lot of what's already been said, but one of the things that we would really like to see is we want to learn what resources are out there so that everybody knows, and then we also want to know where the gaps are so that we know what we can fill in.
Nice. So, throughout the 2 days, you'll be hearing about resources that are there, and be thinking about, well, where are the gaps? What else might need to be developed in the next 6 to 9 months that would be important? Good. Let's go to the next table.
Hi. Our table may be a little bit different. We're all doing an I Need You team this year, and our goal is to come up with a technology that can help libraries either communicate to the public or help the public use the library, or help staff use, I'm not good at public speaking, I'm sorry. But the goal is to use technology to help libraries somehow answer the problem of working with the autistic community.
Super. And needless to say, you're going to hear from the various talks that the role of the internet, the web, and resources is a big part of this conversation. Good, let's go to the last table in this row.
We had several ideas, but I'll only share one since I don't want to steal your thunder down the road. We would like to end up emphasizing to ALA that this needs to be part of the track for training of librarians, no matter what kind of librarians they are, and part of the accreditation standards.
So now we're getting into professional development for librarians and professional standards. So it's not just what's helpful for the state, but really what's helpful for the profession as well. Thank you. Next table.
We talked about is the need for the young adult population to have a place to go, to form friendships, and that a library could be a great resource for that.
Nice. Let's go to the next table, but bringing in particularly the young adult population is a very important part of the community that you're serving. Go ahead.
We were talking at our table about working cooperatively with several organizations throughout our communities and our regions. Several of us are from smaller libraries, and so we're not going to have access to budget funds to be able to do some projects that larger facilities might have. One of the things that we talked about was a LECO-Tech type project. Individually, we can't afford to do that, but if we could come up with relationships regionally that would allow us to split that up and work together as a group, that's one of the things that we hope would come from this, is cooperative relationships to work on some problem solving.
And certainly when we look at the stakeholder alignment data, that issue of how to build coalitions in communities and across regions to leverage, particularly for the small libraries, what will be very limited budgets, limited resources, but which can be multiplied. I call it kind of the stone soup principle, that people start opening their cupboards and say, well, we do have some onions here and other things, and all of a sudden you've got a whole feast. So thank you. Let's go to the next table.
Hi. What we talked about at our table was to continue what another table mentioned, trying to provide more services for adult patrons that are on the autism spectrum, since I think we focus a lot on the children's aspect of it, but remembering that some of those people who are diagnosed early on are moving up and need new services to help them. I also wanted to add that I'm hoping we will come away from this session with some concrete ideas of what we can do and bring that to our libraries to see how it will work for the next session.
So super. First, looking at a whole life cycle, not just young adults, not just early children, but adults who come in as patrons who are on the spectrum. And also looking ahead to the September session, what could happen between now and then so that when you come together, in a sense, you're bringing backward from what you've done and can leverage it even further. So think of this not as a one-time event. Nice. Second to last table.
So the thing we want to add that hasn't been discussed is to make sure that we take into account universal designs for learning, that we have strategies that work for everybody, that aren't segregated, that are inclusionary. And I just want to add something to the leveraging resources thing, because that was another thing we discussed, but we were talking about actually sharing physical resources or looking at maybe whether or not the state can negotiate a statewide license for something like BoardMaker and make it available to everyone.
A statewide license?
For BoardMaker.
Say it again.
License for BoardMaker, it's a software.
Good. Last table.
Good morning. The idea we came up with was marketing, because libraries are looked at as a quiet place. And we should market libraries as a resource center, as a community center. Because there's a lot going on in libraries now, not just a quiet place when we were younger, shh, be quiet, you know, things like that. We want the library to be more like a social center.
Super. Before we open it up, or as we open it up, we took one item from each table. Is there anything else, let's keep the microphone available, that in addition hasn't been mentioned, but that you might also want to contribute? I see a couple of hands. Can we bring?
Hi, we talked about the 3 M's, the marketing and using the right media, you know, the more up-to-date media to market. And the other one was modeling, and that kind of goes with what somebody said about universal. You know, so.
Nice. And I see, Suzanne, there's about 3 or 4 more hands to your left and back. We know you're working out a classification of this.
Hi. One of the reasons that I'm here is that I know that there are many, many community organizations working with people who are affected by ASD. There are small organizations, large organizations, many that are affiliated with the education system, and not all of them are talking to libraries. And I feel like this forum is a real opportunity to make those connections, but I think we need to take that home with us as well. Somebody mentioned, you know, a collection of information about what resources exist, and that's an issue that I have faced, is just not even knowing what organizations are out there, what resources are available, and so on.
So putting yourself in the shoes of somebody just looking for information.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but also establishing a relationship with the library and those service organizations so that we can work together. Because the library is facing, you know, wanting to serve this population, but not necessarily having the connections and the relationships with people who actually know about ASD and are educated to work with this population and have, you know, much more information about resources that are maybe not on the map, that not just for the ASD community, but for librarians to be able to be more effective in serving our patrons by educating ourselves and our staff, and you know, by maybe having some tools that are already in existence that we don't know about.
Super. Let's bring the microphone back. Okay, we have a couple of people here. Good.
Just one more, and piggybacking a little bit on a few things that have been said in terms of serving the needs of the people with ASD in a community. Libraries offer a very attractive place of employment for a lot of less severely affected people, maybe more Asperger's. And I would like to have almost an internal audit to identify opportunities for those living with ASD to make a contribution to their community. There is a very nice environment. It's quiet, somewhat predictable. And I think that there might be some areas for certainly volunteering, possibly paid employment, and it would be great to know specific areas within a library that could use that skill.
Nice. Good. A couple more hands that I see.
I was also going to discuss the issue about employment, but I was going to take it a step further back to high school, working with your high school libraries and shaping that into some employment training opportunities within the schools so that they could already be shaped into that. And when you're talking about higher functioning, you can still have individuals that are maybe moderately affected, that they might have perseverative issues with certain things they like, so they can still be the person who might have specific skills they work on, putting all your stuff back where it goes, or, you know, there's always skill sets they have that aren't necessarily that they have to have big communication skills to do. The other thing that I was going to discuss too is something that I used a lot. I'm a parent as well as a professional, but our family didn't live within our library district, and our library card would cost us $100 and we couldn't afford it. But we used the Early Intervention Clearinghouse, which is part of your library system, and our public library didn't even know what that was until I was returning the books there. And it's probably underutilized, and it's part of your library system. So they have a whole room full of autism resources that I really think that would be a good thing for you guys to take away from this. It's a statewide resource. So.
Super. Thank you. I love all these hands. Yes, go ahead.
I just want to take it to a more personal level as a son of or mother of an adult son. My concern is that we need to work with law enforcement and also let our adult children know how to be safe in a community that will very often misinterpret their echolalia, what they're saying, and have that information available to library patrons in a packet to increase the safety of our children.
I just want to make a comment in terms of the employment and volunteer things. Since all of you have gotten my book, just to tell you that in the chapter on services to teens, I do talk about using teens with ASD as volunteers and how you can structure that. So take a look at that, and there are other things being done around the country as well.
Nice.
I'd also like to see a facilitator specifically for the ASD centers on a full-time basis. I know we're talking about money to stay a little noise up. But a facilitator for the ASD center would be good because they could actually talk to the families and talk to other people within the community that's not familiar with ASD, not just have a resource, but a person, a live person to actually talk, because you know, the average person that comes in and doesn't know anything about ASD and they come into the library, it's like, okay, any, meeny, miny, mo. But if there's a facilitator there that can actually speak to the person, I think it would be more profound, and then that person can take it back to the community.
Super, thank you. I think we have just one or two more.
Hi. I'm Adria, and actually, I'm here living on the spectrum. I would just like to suggest, I know there's not a lot of stimulation usually for an individual with autism to become overwhelmed by in the library. Typically, it tends to be, at least in my opinion, ever since I was a young child, a favorite place because it offers such low stimulation. But in the event that one did become overwhelmed or experience sensory overload, maybe design like different buildings have different names for them, but maybe a quiet room or a calming room. Like, I don't know if you've ever been in like the malls like Dillard's or Von Maur. They have like the nursing mother's rooms with the rocking chairs. A lot of individuals like the sensation of being rocked or being swung anyway. So if we could put like a rocking chair or a swing, like a therapy swing in there, you know, and maybe some low lighting, beanbag chairs. I don't know, it's just an idea.
That's a great idea.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing.
I just want to make sure that we're also paying attention to the part of this population that is nonverbal. I know there's a lot of really awesome programs out there, but for that population, literacy isn't just a part of their educational success, it's a necessity for communication. So I just want to make sure that's included.
Yeah, so across the spectrum, it's not all one thing, that different needs for different people in different circumstances. Thank you.
Is there time for one more?
One more, yes.
I work for a program, it's a statewide program in Illinois called StarNet. Many of you may or may have not heard of. And when I started working for StarNet about 6 or 7 years ago, something that I noticed was, and it was very important to me as a parent of a child on the spectrum, is that I was not introduced to the special education law book, Parents' Right Guide, Educational Rights and Responsibilities book. I was not introduced to that until my son was in junior high. And so I made it a point that all of our libraries in the 38 counties that we serve did get a copy of that for their library. So I don't know if we could contact ISB and ask if they could possibly supply the libraries in the state of Illinois with a copy of that. But many families don't even know what their rights are. So I think it's very important that the library, being a resource center for families, has that on hand.
Sure. And, you know, people who have worked with educational plans know how important these are and how complicated sometimes it is to work with the system. So educating people on their rights, that's part of what libraries can help to do. We have one more, okay. And then I'm going to just take a minute and review what you've said, and then we'll move on to the next part of the program. Yes.
My name is Nalini Mahajan, and I'm from Mary Joy Rehabilitation Hospital. And we do have a website. This is for people who are saying that we don't know. Actually, it's accumulation of medical and other resources. So that is something we developed by the funding from the National Library of Medicine. And it took us 4 years to develop the website. Everything on that website is free. And it's broken down by education, by law, and this is actually the brochure. And I'm hoping with all your help, we will be able to keep this going. But I just wanted to share that with you. This was done by a 2 years needs assessment where the clinicians, the social workers, the parents all participated in focus groups and online survey, which was taken by about 300 participants. So just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you for sharing. And there is a table with quite a bit of resources, but I'm sure there's even more resources represented in the room. So figuring out how in the course of the next 2 days you'll be able to know what's here and share will be an important part of the goal. Let me just quickly review what you said. In addition to the goals of building shared appreciation, identifying leadership roles for libraries, fostering stakeholder alignment among various community resources, and developing a shared vision for success, you also highlighted the fact that you are all in this together. There's an interest in training. There's an interest in action items by the time you leave tomorrow. There's a need to find out where the gaps are in resources. There's a potential for technology to play a key role. There's an important piece in the professional development for librarians. Let's pay attention to the special needs of young adults. Let's work cooperatively with different organizations in our community. Let's figure out how to work with the adult patrons that might come in the library. Let's have concrete things that we can come back in September to build on. And let's identify what's already been learned. Let's make sure that we're inclusive in our approach, that things don't get segregated, that there may be some resources, software or others like Boardmaker, that there could be a statewide license. There's marketing, media, and modeling, the 3 M's. That there are many community organizations that aren't connected to libraries, and so that's an important piece. That there are surveys that have been done. In fact, we'll present one example of that later this morning. Libraries represent an important place for employment for people who are on the spectrum. And high school libraries could be a place to develop skills that point towards careers in this area. And there's work to be done with law enforcement so that people are safe and people understand on both sides of that conversation how that goes. There's a book that's been, of course, distributed and that does speak to these issues. There's a need for facilitators in the ASD centers. We have somebody here who's on the spectrum who talked about how important it is to have calming spaces. Kind of like a nursing mother's room with rocking chairs, therapy chairs, that there's a portion of the population that's nonverbal, so there are different needs for different folks. And the state StarNet program, getting word out on parents and families' rights and responsibilities sooner. And finally, another resource that was mentioned is this community hospital, which took 4 years with funding from the National Medical Library to put together resources. So again, this resource sharing will be part of the discourse while you're together. So first of all, thank you. This really does further flesh out the goals and expectations for the session and sets the stage for your shared work, our shared work ahead. We'll look at this list again at the end of the day tomorrow to see how we've done. But for now, I think you can give yourselves a round of applause for having really sketched out the work ahead in some very good ways. What I'm going to do is